The House of Shadows. In a small village, there was an old house. Everyone in the village was afraid of it. The house was big and dark, and no one lived there for many years. The villagers said that the house was haunted. They believed that shadows moved inside the house at night. One day, a young man named Ollie moved to the village. He did not believe in ghosts or haunted houses. He wanted to know the truth about the old house. So, one evening, he decided to go inside the house and spend the night there. Ollie walked to the house just as the sun was setting. The door was heavy, and it made a loud noise as he opened it. Inside, the house was cold and dusty. The furniture was old, and spider webs covered the corners of the rooms. Ollie found a place to sit and waited. As the night grew darker, the house became silent. Suddenly, Ollie heard footsteps coming from the hallway. He stood up and looked around, but he saw nothing. Then, he noticed a shadow moving across the wall. The shadow was not his. It was tall and moved slowly. Ollie felt a chill run down his spine, but he stayed calm. He thought it might be his imagination. But then, the shadow moved closer to him. Ollie could now hear breathing slow and deep. He turned around quickly, but there was no one there. The shadows began to multiply. They danced on the walls, growing larger and darker. Ollie realized that he was not alone in the house. The shadows seemed to have a life of their own. They whispered in low voices that he couldn't understand. Ollie's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he had to leave the house, but the shadows blocked his way. He could barely see the door. Just as the shadows started to close in on him, Ollie felt something cold touch his shoulder. In a panic, Ollie ran toward the door, pushing through the shadows. He managed to open the door and escape into the night. He didn't stop running until he was far from the house. The next day, the villagers saw Ollie return, pale and shaken. He told them what happened, but no one believed him. They said it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But Ollie knew the truth. The house was alive with shadows, and they would never let anyone rest in peace. Since that night, no one has dared to enter the house again. The villagers say that at night, they still see shadows moving in the windows. And if you listen closely, you might hear the whispers of the shadows calling your name. Ollie couldn't shake the memory of the shadows. The village had returned to its quiet routine, but Ollie's mind was restless. He knew that the shadows were not just a figment of his imagination. They were real, and they had a story to tell. The following night, despite the fear that gripped his heart, Ollie decided to return to the house. This time, he was prepared. He brought a lantern, some food, and a journal to document everything he saw and heard. He was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what it cost him. As Ollie approached the house, the air seemed colder than the night before. The windows, dark and empty, seemed to watch him as he walked up the path. When he reached the door, he hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. The same loud creak echoed through the empty halls. Once inside, Ollie lit the lantern, casting long shadows on the walls. The house felt even more oppressive than before, as if it was waiting for him. He walked through the rooms, carefully examining everything. The dust, the cobwebs, the old furniture, it was all the same. But something was different. He could feel it in the air, a presence that was growing stronger. As the night deepened, the shadows began to stir. At first, it was just a flicker on the wall, then another, until the room was filled with moving darkness. Ollie's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. He pulled out his journal and began to write, describing everything he saw. The shadows danced around him, growing bolder. They seemed to be communicating with each other, moving in patterns that Ollie couldn't understand. Then, as he watched, one shadow separated from the others. It moved slowly toward him, its form shifting and changing until it resembled a human figure. Ollie held his breath. The shadow stood before him, tall and menacing. It reached out a hand, its fingers long and thin, like tendrils of smoke. Ollie could feel the coldness radiating from it, chilling him to the bone. But he didn't move. He wanted to understand. The shadow began to whisper. At first, the words were unintelligible, a soft murmur that sent shivers down Ollie's spine. But as he listened, the words became clearer. The shadow was telling a story of betrayal, of love lost, and of a curse that bound the spirits to the house for all eternity. Ollie scribbled furiously in his journal, trying to capture every word. The shadow's voice grew louder, more insistent. It spoke of a time long ago when the house was full of life, when it was home to a family who lived in peace. But that peace was shattered by a terrible act of betrayal, and the house became a prison for the spirits who could not move on. As the shadows spoke, the other shadows began to gather around Ollie, their whispers joining in a haunting chorus. Ollie felt their sadness, their anger, and their despair. He realized that they were not just shadows, they were the souls of the family who once lived in the house, trapped between this world and the next. Ollie knew that he had to help them. He asked the shadow what he could do to free them. The shadow's form wavered, as if considering his offer. Then it whispered a single word: forgiveness. Ollie understood. The spirits were bound to the house because of the anger and hatred they held onto in life. To free them, he would need to find a way to release those emotions, to bring peace to the house once more. But how could he do that? The shadow began to fade, retreating back into the darkness. The other shadows followed, leaving Ollie alone in the silent house. He knew that his task was not going to be easy. He would need to learn more about the family, about the events that led to their tragic end. Only then could he hope to break the curse. Ollie spent the rest of the night in the house, piecing together the clues from the shadow's story. As dawn approached, he left the house, determined to return with the knowledge he needed to set the spirits free. But as he stepped outside, he felt a strange sensation, a heavy weight in his chest. It was as if a part of the house's darkness had followed him. Ollie looked back at the house, its windows still dark and empty. He knew that his journey was far from over. The shadows would not rest until they were free, and neither would he. Ollie's quest to free the shadows would take him deep into the village's history, uncovering secrets that had been buried for generations. The more he learned, the more dangerous his mission became as the shadows grew stronger and their hold on the house tightened. But Ollie was determined to see it through, no matter the cost.